This is from Crystal. When I was growing up, poetry was taught as a standalone unit. We covered it and didn't come back to it again until the next year. Would it be better to weave poetry in throughout the year?
I would, if you possibly can, I really would. And there are many reasons for this, but one is that by the end of the year, they're actually looking forward to poetry days because they're so much fun. They're play dates. Poetry is a play date, and that's how you're supposed to approach it. If you're heavy about it, if it's a task and wearisome, you're just missing the whole point. I think it's great to sprinkle it around. And also it underlines the real difference between poetry and prose. They're both necessary to life as I see it, but people can live without that joy all their lives, and you can't escape prose, but you can escape poetry.
Are there any poems or poets especially good at portraying life in Texas?
Oh, I think every poem is good for every place, because it teaches you to look at the things where you are in a different way. For example, there's a poem by Lee Young Lee. I don't have it with me, or I'd read part of it, about eating a salad. And I would just turn that into, how would you be that particular about eating barbecue or something? So the content of the poem is not as important as what the poem is doing. So you can take a 15th century Japanese haiku and have people look at an oak tree in the same way, a Texas oak tree, or a pond, or it's better not to think that it has to be about what you know, because it's human. So it always belongs to you, no matter how old it is or what the subject matter is. It belongs to you.
Okay, very interesting. How heavily do you push a vocabulary lesson when working with poetry?
Well, I know that there are things that you have to do as public school teachers. You have to fulfill certain requirements and all that. Vocabulary is one. I do push it in a way because I love words. They're fun. But I really like, if nobody knows what a word means, I like just guessing what it could mean. It sounds like it should mean this or whatever. Play with words, dwell on words. I don't ever give quizzes around words, but I might on a quiz introduce a new word and just say, what do you think this might mean? And then you introduce a context and you see how it works in context. So I don't know, words are fun. And sometimes I have them collect words they run across that they don't know. And and I put them in my bowl, my bowl of collected things. And one day when there are enough of them, I'll draw them out and say, well, what should this word mean? And we have a hilarious time.
That sounds fun. Do you have any recommendations for living poets to bring into the classroom?
Well, there's one that is Naomi teaching? Is she teaching in this series, Naomi Shihab Nye?
Oh, no.
The last time I taught, she taught with me. She's
not this fall, but
oh, darn.
We'll have her in the spring.
Okay, well, I would always have her. She's a Texas poet. She's on the American Academy of Poetry. We featured her in a series. Bill Moyers, that I used to work with, did a series on poetry, and he featured her in one of them. And so you can actually have the students watch that before she visits. She's well, Eric, you can back me up in this, can't you? How wonderful she is.
Naomi is terrific, and I think some of you have been a part of our programs before and have seen her present, but she's really wonderful. She lives in San Antonio. She worked as a poet in the school, supported by the Texas Commission on the Arts for years. So she's traveled the entire state and has taught poetry, I think, in every community in Texas.
So all around the world.
Yes.
No,
goes to.
Yeah. And also, if you look at the Texas Institute of Letters, you can see which poets, and you can just write them, which poets are in your town. And you could get one of their books and have a local poet come in. So on the one hand, there's Naomi, who is top of the top in my book. And then there are a lot of great poets all over Texas. So there's going to be a poet in your town. There's going to be more than one, I guarantee.
Okay, another one. What poems have you lived with whose meanings have changed over time?
Every poem I've lived with, it's changed over time. That's why the friend that I was talking about who taught poetry, that's why he could teach he taught poetry for 40 years. And every time he put a poem on, he was learning something new about it. And when he did, he just lit up. You could just see it. Poems are like, even words can do that. So it's like people, they can end up continuing to surprise you. And I think anything that I'll give an example. I was in science before I was in poetry. So as an undergraduate, I worked my way through school, working in a circadian rhythms laboratory. And one night I was working in there translating, scientific papers for for the boss. And next door was a lab. And I kept hearing the graduate students saying, "Oh, isn't he a beauty? Isn't she a beauty?" And I thought, what in the world are they talking about? So I got up and I walked over to the lab and I looked. They were talking about cockroaches. They were doing experiments with cockroaches from all over the world. And they had looked at these cockroaches so long that the distinctions between them, they were actually seeing as beautiful. And that taught me something. That really taught me something. It's like artists. Whatever you look at long enough begins to shine from the inside with its own being. So anything you live with, that you look at with the eyes of the muscle that is trained by poetry and art, it will reveal its beauty to you. Another example, if that one doesn't make sense, the cockroaches, you can't buy the cockroaches. These graduate students certainly were excited about them. But every grandmother who shows you a picture of her grandchild, all these babies look like Winston Churchill, but she'll show you her picture and say, "Isn't he beautiful?" And of course you have to say yes, and they're cute. I mean, I'm not saying they're not, but they're adored. It's like the inner being of anything, when it shines through, is beautiful. So poetry allows you to get rid of the ordinary that covers our eyes to see the wonder in things.
Very, very well said. We have time for one more question. This is from Crystal. Could we hear more about the ways that you arrange competition around poetry with students?
Yeah, almost every activity that I gave you can be turned into a competitive activity. And I say that when the energy is low, I arrange for things to be done in groups and for groups to compete with each other, which is what you'll do in the breakout room. And if we were actually at Humanities Texas in a room, you would see how the groups would rise to the occasion. It's not rough competition, I don't mean that, but I mean just a little bit of, oh, I think we've got this right. And students rise to that, the energy rises. And it's important to have the energy level to feel energized. Otherwise, some things just don't, it's like a Broadway musical. The energy is very high, otherwise it doesn't come in, or a football game. So poetry, you can be very quiet, but the energy, it helps to have the energy high, even if it's a very quiet poem.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.